We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Hey Amid Beis and Meseches Baba Kamma. This is Baba Kamma Daf 95b. On the previous Amid, the Gemara was discussing Rabbi Meir's Shita in terms of Shinoi Kona, and the Gemara had established that Rabbi Meir does hold Shinoi Kona, but Rabbi Meir imposes a fine, meaning to say, let's say a Gazlan steals an item, and then he improves the item through a Shinoi, so really he should acquire that item, and he only owes the value at the Shas HaGzela, what it was worth at the time of the Gzela, but Rabbi Meir imposes a fine and says he has to return the entire item, even the item together with the improvements, because we don't want the Gazlan to profit. We don't want the Chote, the sinner, to be Niskar, to profit off of his stealing, and that's why Rabbi Meir imposes that Kanas. And the Gemara asked, would Rabbi Meir impose that Knas even b'shogeg? Let's say you have a situation where it was taken by somebody, but it was by mistake. It wasn't on purpose. So then, maybe there's no reason to impose that Knas. Would we say in that situation that Shinoi is Konan, the Gazlan can actually keep the improvements and only has to return the original value of what he stole? And the Gemara in the previous Amud brought a Brisa, and the Gemara in the previous Amud established that the Brisa is Rabbi Meir. And in this Brisa, it talked about cases of collecting from Nechasim b'nei Chorin, where you're only allowed to collect from free property. You're not allowed to collect from property with a lien on it. And the cases in the Brisa included a case called Peiros and Shevach Peiros, and the Gemara wanted to identify exactly what is the case. And so the Gemara said the case is as follows. You have a situation of a Gazlan who sells a piece of property to a Lokeach. The Gazlan is the Mocher. It's not really his property. He's selling it to the Lokeach even though he stole that land. And then it turns out that when we find out that it was stolen land, the Lokeach has to return the land to the original owner, to the Nigzal, the one it was stolen from. And so now the Gemara explains as follows. When that Lokeach now wants to get his money back from the Gazlan, because the Gazlan took achrayas on the sale, he said, if this land should be taken away from you, I am going to take achrayas, I take responsibility and will pay you back. So the Brisa is saying, Gova es hakeren minachasim mishubadim, this Lokeach, he can collect the principal, what he originally bought, that he can even collect from property with a lien on it. Meaning to say, as Rashi explains, Gova minachasim mishubadim shu kadam, because he's like the first creditor, so to speak, v'hava kamil v'bishtar, as if there was a loan here with a document, sharei kasav lo b'shtar ha'machir, because in the document of sale to this Lokeach it said, Shem yitrafua mimenu, that if it should be taken away from him, yachzor v'yigva minachasav, he can go collect from the Gazlan's property. Therefore there was a lien on the Gazlan's property, on the Mocher's property, and if the Mocher sold some property to somebody else, this Lokeach can collect from those Lekuchos. He can collect from that property with the lien on it in terms of the Karen, in terms of the principle of what he originally bought. However, v'yas hashevach, when it comes to any improvements that happen to the land, he wants to collect that as well. That's only minachasim b'nei chorin. That he can only collect from free property. That he cannot collect. There's no lien in terms of that. He can't collect from the chasim mishubadim in that situation. The asa balara v'shakel. And so the Gemara now says, the Gemara comments, the original owner of the land, he gets to take back his land. The nigzal, he takes back the land from that Lokeach. V'shivche, and he also takes all the improvement of that land. Now the issue over here is, again, normally when we talk about stolen objects, we say shinoi is kona, and we say that you only owe the original person the original value. Now here, of course, we're talking about land. Land, the halach of shinoi kona does not apply, but the Gemara now explains. My lav, is it not? Bi'am ha'aretz. Aren't we talking here about an am ha'aretz? Meaning to say the person, the Lokeach who bought this property, he doesn't know the halacha. To lo yada de karka nigzelas or aina nigzelas. He has no idea whether land has halacha that it could be stolen, meaning that there is a kinyan on land or there isn't a kinyan on land. He has no idea. This is a case of shogeg, exactly the case, a case of essentially stealing b'shogeg, like the case that we're asking within Rabbi Meir. V'afilu hachi, and nevertheless, ka'asi bal karka, the original owner of the land can come along. V'shaka liyara v'shivcha, he's allowed to take back his land and all the improvements. And so therefore the Gemara says, Ushma minan, don't we see from this, b'shogeg nami kanis, that the fine is imposed even b'shogeg. That's why he's allowed to get back the improvements on the land as well. And Rashi explains, Kanis, again, we impose a fine over here, de lahadir shevach l'nigzal, that the nigzal can take back the improvement as well. And the Gemara responds, Amri, they answer to this, lo, no, belokeach talmud chacham v'yada. We're talking about the person who bought it as a talmud chacham, and he understands, he knows the halachas, that karka is eina nigzelas, karka is not considered stolen, and there's no kinyan on karka. And therefore, when he bought the karka from a gazlan, from someone who stole the land, he actually knew exactly what he was doing. He realized he's not allowed to buy that land. There is no kinyan on that land in terms of the stolen land, and therefore, since he knew exactly what he was doing, that's why in that case, Rabbi Meir would impose a fine and say that the shevach goes back to the nigzal as well. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following Mishnah. This Mishnah was brought on the previous Amud. Litzvo alo edom v'tzavo shachar, shachar v'tzavo edom. Again, somebody gives material wool to somebody to dye red, and this person doesn't dye it red, he dyes it black. This is a case where he's clearly making a mistake, or he gives it to him to dye it black and he dyes it red. So again, Rabbi Meir Omer, we have the same Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, no sein lo demeit smaro, so he has to pay him back, but only the value of the wool. You don't have to pay for the improvement. Demeit smaro in it, demeit smaro v'shivcha lo, he's paying for the value of the wool, but not for the value of the wool and the improvement. And the Gemara therefore says, if it should enter your mind, b'shogeg nami konis, that Rabbi Meir imposes the fine even when it happens b'shogeg, so therefore there should be a fine over here. In this situation, he should pay back the value of the wool, and it should be the value, the higher value of wool as dyed wool, demeit smaro v'shivcho, boy lemeis v'lei, shouldn't he have to give him back the wool and the value of the improvement? Elalav shmamino, rather, is it not that don't we see from here, b'mezid konis b'shogeg lo konis, that Rabbi Meir only imposes his kanas b'mezid, he does not impose it when it's a situation b'shogeg, when it is by mistake. And the Gemara says, Shema Mina, indeed we do see that this is the case. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, returning again to discuss the Bryce and the previous Amud. Again, the case of the Bryce and the previous Amud was a person steals an animal and their improvements. Let's say he shears the wool. So according to Rabbi Meir, the Gazlan has to return both the animal and the improvements. That's what we just discussed. And then Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon seem to be saying the same thing. They both seem to be saying that the Gazlan just pays kishas hagazela, like the time that he stole it, and anything that was an improvement he acquires through a shinoi. And the Gemara now quotes the Bryce again. Rabbi Yehuda says, Gezela chozeres be'ene, that which was stolen should just return as is. Again, the case is that everything, let's say by the wool, you sheared off all of the wool, so you just return as is. You don't have to worry about returning the wool. And Rabbi Shimon says, Rowan osa ki'ilu hishuma etzlo bekesef, we do an evaluation. And again, that seems to be saying the same thing. We do an evaluation. What was it worth at the time that it was stolen? And so the Gemara says, my beinai, what's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon? Amar Rav Zavid says, b'shevach she'al gabe gezelo kamiflagi. They're arguing, let's say the improvement is still attached, it's still on the animal that was stolen. And Rashi explains, b'shevach she'al gabe gezela, kagon, for example, she'ishbicha etzlo, let's say it improved while it was by the Gazlan, v'adayin lo notz lahimenu, but that which was the improvement wasn't actually taken, it wasn't separated from the animal. Kagon reikonis v'nesarba, let's say he stole an animal, it was empty, meaning to say it wasn't pregnant, and then it became pregnant, now it's a pregnant animal. O te'una gizor, let's say it's a situation where it requires to be sheared, but the wool has not been shorn off yet. So in that situation, that's where we have a machlokes. Again, b'shevach shal gabe gezela kamiflagi. Rabbi Yehuda savar de nigzal have. Rabbi Yehuda holds in that case it goes to the nigzal. For Rabbi Shimon savar de gazlan have. Rabbi Shimon says it goes to the gazlan, meaning Rabbi Yehuda says gezela chozeres be'ene. So actually, in that case, even though in general Rabbi Yehuda would seem to be saying that the improvement stays by the gazlan, in that case, no, the improvement actually goes to the nigzal because it's still attached to the animal that was stolen. But Rabbi Shimon says no, in that situation, also over there, the improvement will stay by the gazlan. And Rashi explains, the Rabbi Yehuda savar de nigzal have. Rabbi Yehuda holds that goes to the nigzal. V'hachi Kamma Rabbi Yehuda. Here's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Gezela chozeres be'ene lebaleha. The gezela goes back as is to the original owner. Bein l'shevach, bein l'greus, and that works whether it's l'shevach, whether it's for improvement, whether it did not improve. Kimo shehi b'shas tvia bebezin. We look at it as it is at the time that it's being claimed in bezdin. He chozeres. That's how it goes back. V'hecha degara. So for example, let's say it lessened in value. Could go in gazes of a yalda. For example, let's say they sheared off the wool, or let's say it gave birth, and so now the animal itself is actually now worth less. Mishalim pichsa, so there certainly mishalim pichsa vadai to hadar katavale nigzal to make gaziza. Certainly that which it lessened, the nigzal is able to claim. The nigzal can say, what you stole from me was worth more than what you're giving back to me now, and I want therefore money. I want reimbursement for that loss. That is certainly true. So in that situation, katavale nigzal to make gaziza v'uber, he can claim from him the value of the shearings, the value of the fact that it was pregnant. Shagazal mimeno, at the time that it was stolen from him. That is certainly true in that situation, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Upliga de Rabbi Meir, and that would actually argue in Rabbi Meir to Amar Kule Shivcha Yoivle, because again Rabbi Meir says the entire improvement goes to the nigzal. That's not true according to Rabbi Yehuda. It's not the entire improvement, but just what it was at the time of the gezela. V'afagav dekone giza uvlad b'shinoi. Now, even though there is a kinyan over here, really the gazlan acquires the shearings and he acquires the vlad through the shinoi. Chazino le command de Kule Shivcha Akati. We view it as if the entire improvement is still on the animal. Kimisha lo nigzaza, as if it wasn't shorn at all. Umishalim kula misham kanasan. Again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the entire thing is paid because we impose a fine. That's what the Gemara said in the previous Amud, that Rabbi Meir is imposing a fine on the gazlan. The Kamma Rabbi Yehuda. Now Rabbi Yehuda is saying to Rabbi Meir, Kidi Isa hashta hadra, goes back as it is now. V'hadar tava nami mine giza uvlad yoiv le damim demei kar. Now, if he claims, again, let's say it's worth less now, so if the nigzal claims and says, I want what it was then at the time it was stolen, so then he'll claim that, and you have to give him that money. To kana giza uvlad b'shinoi, because there is a kinyan in terms of the shearings and the vlad, there is a kinyan on that, he does acquire that b'shinoi. V'hecha da'adayin kol hashevach aleh. Now, if it's a situation where all the improvement is still on the animal, so now the animal as is actually worth more than the time it was stolen, so choseres kemos shehi. In that case, actually, the nigzal would profit, it would go back as is, and the nigzal would get back the whole thing. Also, Rabbi Shimon disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda on that and says, "Afilu shivcha aleha," even if the improvement is still on the body of the animal, note lo gazlan. The gazlan can still take it. He always only pays kashas hagazela, the shinoi kona, because the shinoi acquires v'lo yishalim elodamim richonim. He just pays the original value. Ki'ilu hishuma etzlo b'kesef. We make that evaluation in terms of money. And the Gemara continues, Rav Papa says a different explanation of the Machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. To kuli al mashevach shal gabe gezela de gazlan have. Everybody actually agrees that if there is improvement and it's still on the body of the animal that was stolen, that belongs to the gazlan. We do say shinoi kona. Here they're arguing about a situation of taking half or a third or a quarter in terms of the standards of that community for a sharecropper. That's what they're discussing here. Rabbi Yehuda savar shevach shal gabe gezela kule de gazlan have. Rabbi Yehuda says any improvement, even if it's still on the animal that was stolen, it all goes to the gazlan because we say the gazlan acquires it b'shinoi. However, Rabbi Shimon savar, but Rabbi Shimon says that's not the case. Lemechsa l'shlish v'leravia hu de shakal gazlan. The gazlan is only going to take either half or a third or a quarter, whatever the minhag is in that particular place for a sharecropper to take in terms of, let's say, improving a field or something along those lines. That's what the gazlan will take in this case. Rashi explains, the kuliyal mashevach gezela de gazlan have uve'ene de kamar Yehuda kidmei kara ko'amar. When you say you return it be'ene, you return the animal as is, that just means what it was worth originally. And lemechsa l'shlish v'chulu kederech minhag hamedina. Rashi explains again, it's like the normal custom of that area. Lemekable behemos lashbichon. Let's say somebody in general wouldn't be a gazlan. He would take a behema from somebody else, and he would make an arrangement that he'll improve, so to speak, the behema, and he'll take a certain share, whatever the minhag is, if it's a half, if it's a third, if it's a quarter, lizman gadol kazeh, for some long amount of time. So that's all the gazlan gets, according to Rabbi Shimon. He's not going to get the entire improvement. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Gazal para v'nis abra etzlo v'yalda, if he stole a cow and it became pregnant by him, by the gazlan, and it gave birth, Rachel v'netana etzlo v'gazza, if he stole a sheep and then it had wool on it and he sheared it, Meshalim kashas hagzela, so there he pays according to the time that it was worth when he actually stole it. And so the Gemara says, Yalda in, lo yalda, so it sounds like if it gives birth, meaning it's no longer attached to the animal, so then we say kashas hagzela. But lo yalda, but let's say it didn't give birth, let's say it became pregnant and it was still pregnant, so hajja be'ena, so we can make an inference that you would actually return it as is. And so the Gemara says, B'shalam al Rav Zavid, I understand according to Rav Zavid, Diyamar shevach shal gabi gezela dinigzal havil Rav Yehuda, that he says that if the improvement is still on the animal, therefore it goes to the nigzal according to Rav Yehuda. So hamani Rav Yehuda, so you can say that this Mishnah is following Rav Yehuda, the inference would follow what Rav Yehuda holds. El Rav Papa da'amar de gazlan have, but according to Rav Papa who says that by shevach shal gabi gezela as well, it always goes to the gazlan, hamani, so who's the author of our Mishnah? Lo Rav Yehuda. For lo Rav Shimon, it's not Rav Yehuda, it's not Rav Shimon. And the Gemara says, Amar loch Rav Papa will say to you, Hu adin afilu lo yaldanami kashas hagzela hu de meshalim. It could be the Mishnah saying, even if the animal would still be pregnant, still you only pay back kashas hagzela, nothing more. V'hada katani yalda, the only reason the Mishnah talks about a case of yalda where the animal gave birth, aidi the nasiv reisha yalda, since in the beginning of the Mishnah they're discussing a case where it gave birth, nasiv seifa nami yalda. So we talk in the end of the Mishnah also about a case where the animal gave birth already. As Rashi says, aidi the nasiv reisha yalda lashmin and lo meshalim gizos uvlados kedashta. There we're talking about the animal gave birth because we want to say that you don't pay the shearings, you don't pay the value of the offspring as it is right now. Ela dmei para ha'omedes leilid. We just pay the value of an animal that is ready to give birth. That's the case of the Reisha, where the animal that was stolen was pregnant, was ready to give birth. So that we talk about a case where it actually gave birth. So nakat nami seifa yalda. So therefore, at the end of the Mishnah, we also talk about a case where it gave birth. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavase de Rav Papa, we have a brisa that supports Rav Papa's view. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Rowan osa ki'ilu hishuma etzlo bekasef lemechza l'shlish v'leravia. We view it, we evaluate in terms of money for half, for a third, or quarter. Again, that's exactly the explanation that Rav Papa gave within Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Ashi says, Ki havinan bei Rav Kahana, when we were by Rav Kahana, Iboy Lon, we had the following question. Rabbi Shimon Damar Lemechsa L'Shlish V'Leravia, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that the Gazlan takes a half or a third or a quarter, again, if there's improvements, he doesn't take the full improvement, he just takes a certain portion. Who the Shakel Gazlan, so the Gazlan takes that, Ki Misalkinan Le, Bidmei Misalkinan Le, when we remove the Gazlan, meaning when we give him that half or that third or that quarter, are we giving him Demei, are we giving him money? Or maybe he takes from the meat of the actual animal. We answer the question from here, from the following statement of Shmuel. The Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel, because Rav Nachman said that Shmuel said, there are three cases where we evaluate the improvements and we give it to the person in terms of money, and the Gemara is determining from Shmuel that in this case as well, we're going to give it in terms of money. And the Gemara says, and these are the three cases. Bechor lepashet, let's say you have a situation of two brothers who inherit, one is a Bechor, a firstborn, the other is a Pashat, the other is not a firstborn, and there's some kind of improvements. So in that situation, those improvements have to be paid off in money, not in land. Ubal chov lelokeach, similar case by a creditor and a purchaser. If there are any improvements, it has to be paid off in money. Ubal chov liyasomim, and also a creditor and orphans. Any improvements are paid off in money, and in this case as well, it has to be paid off in money. Tosfos notes, shlosha shaman lan hashevach afagav de katani gimel. Now, even though it says three cases, and now we're applying it to our case of a Gazlan as well, Tana v'shayir Gazlan, so they left off the case of Gazlan. Tosfos says v'shayir nami oris, they also left off the case of a sharecropper, shimbol esalko me'arusasu mesalko min hashevach bedamim, that if they want to remove him from the profits of the sharecropper, they want to pay him off, so to speak, you do that with money. In all of these cases, you're going to pay off the person with money. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravina le Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, Mi Amar Shmuel ba'alchov l'lokeach yoev le shavach. Does Shmuel really say that if you have a creditor and you have a purchaser, that he's going to give him that improvement? V'Amar Shmuel, but didn't Shmuel say, ba'alchov goves hashavach, that a creditor is allowed to collect the improvement? He doesn't have to give the improvement to the purchaser. We'll see Rashi in a moment for the details. Amar le said back to him, lo kash, it's not difficult. We make the following distinction. Kan b'shavach hamagia l'chseifayim. In one case, we're talking about improvements that reach the shoulders, meaning to say they're full improvements, everything is fully ripened. In the other case, we're talking about improvements that don't reach the shoulders. Amar le, he said back to him, but isn't there incidents every day? And Shmuel says that the person can collect even if it's magia l'chseifayim, even if it reaches the shoulders. Amar le, he said to him, lo kash, it's not difficult. And Rashi explains, again, Bechor Lepashet, when you have two sons, one is the firstborn, one is not the firstborn, and they're splitting, so then the money is paid off if there's any kind of shevach, if there's any kind of improvement. And Rashi explains, Sheishbichu es hanechasim kodem chaluka. The case over here is that the property actually improves before the two sons actually divide up the property. Uveshas chaluka notel ha-bechor pishnayim. Now, at the time they actually divide the property, so the Bechor is going to take double bekarkos, he's going to take double the portion in terms of the land that he is receiving. He has to return to the non-Bechor 1/4 of the improvement of the portion of that extra portion that he took of the Bechora, and he has to return that as money. Because he shouldn't really be taking double in terms of what actually improved. So if it improved 12 zuz, when this brother is taking double the amount in terms of the land, he's going to be taking 8 zuz from that part that improved. He has to return to him 2 of those zuz, and he has to do that in money. The point over here is he doesn't give it to him in land, he gives it to him in money. If he wants, again, he can remove him, he can give him money instead. He can give him those 2 zuzim. The pashat, the one who's not the Bechor, cannot say to the Bechor that I want these 2 zuzim in karka. And in terms of the math, the idea is that if the improvement is 12 zuz, so then when the Bechor in general takes double, he's going to end up getting 8 of those zuz, and the other brother is going to end up getting 4 zuz. That's going to give the Bechor the double amount. Now they have to even out the shevach. That's why he owes 2 zuz. When he gives 2 zuz back, now he will have taken 6 zuz of the improvement, and the other brother will have taken 6 zuz of the improvement. So that's how they balance it out. And the reason why that is considered to be 1/4 is because 2 zuz is 1/4 of the 8 zuz that the Bechor initially took. And the second case was ubal chov lelokeach, if you have a creditor and a purchaser. The case is bal chov hatorif lekuchos b'shvil chov sheyesh lo ala mocher. Let's say the bal chov, the creditor, he's owed money by the mocher doesn't have money, so now he goes to the lekuchos and he's collecting from the lekuchos. Ein lo koach b'mesh hishbiach lokeach, so he's not able to collect the improvements that the lokeach made. He can only collect from the land, the original land, so to speak. Umesalko bal chov b'damim, and so the bal chov, therefore, if he takes that land and there's improvement in that land, he has to pay off the lokeach with money. V'nosin lo demei shivcho, he has to give him the value of that improvement. V'nosin lo karkav b'shir shivcho, he's not able to give him land, or he doesn't have to give him land that's equal the amount of the improvement. He gives him money instead. And finally, the last case was ubal chov liyasomim, if you have a creditor and you have orphans. Again, a similar case, bal chov sheyorid l'nichse yasomim b'shvil chov avian, if a bal chov takes from the property of the orphans because of a debt that the father has, ein lo b'mesh yishbichu nechasim la'achar misas avian klum, he doesn't get anything if the land improved after the death of their father. And again, umala lehen l'shivchan b'damim, he pays them off in money. V'nosein mos im yirtze, he can give money if he wants to. And then the Gemara said, is it really true that the Baal Chov, the creditor, does not collect the Shevach from the Lokeach? Didn't Shmuel say, Goves HaShevach, that the creditor does collect the Shevach? Ve'eno machzer leLokeach klum, he doesn't give anything to the Lokeach. And so the Gemara made a distinction between Shevach HaMagia L'chseifayim and Shevach She'ein Magia L'chseifayim. And Rashi explains HaMagia L'chseifayim means Kigon Tavua Shegodla Kol Tzarcha. Let's say you have grain that grew fully, so that kind of improvement, Nos no L'Lokeach Odameh, that he has to actually give back to the Lokeach, or he gives its value back to the Lokeach. But if it's Ein Magia L'chseifayim, so then the Baal Chov is allowed to collect it, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Vav Amud Aleph.